All right, everybody. Happy Wednesday as everybody starts joining us. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. Hello. I'm seeing some folks jumping in. Good afternoon. We're just going to hold for just about a moment or so for those of you who are on here. So, like I was just saying to Jenny, grab your water, grab your beverage. If you're eating your lunch with us, make sure you got a fork, and we'll get started. Hello, hello. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to our monthly free parent webinar series. I am Eve Boyd, obviously not Tiffany Feingold. I'm our community ambassador for Guiding Bright Minds. So, my job is ultimately to help educate parents and caregivers and those looking for resources more about Guiding Bright Minds. And also, I get the privilege of interfacing with our professional community quite often. So, that's one of my I love that. I love talking to parents, love talking to professionals. For those who are new to Guiding Bright Minds, we are a free online resource for parents, caregivers, families of neurodivergent adults, children, and anything in between. So if you've never been to our website, definitely check us out, guidingbrightminds.com. We have all kinds of different resources from a directory of providers all the way to lots more of these free webinars that you can watch and learn all kinds of different topics. So thank you so much for spending this time with us today. So we are excited. A couple different house cleaning things for Guiding Bright Minds. Obviously, for those who are in Colorado or who want to come to Colorado this summer, we obviously have the fourth annual Neurodiversity Resource Fair coming up on June 13th at Denver Academy. So mark your calendars, RSVP. We would love to have you there. I'm getting word that Dinger's coming back, a Dinger from the Rockies, as well as the Temple Grandin mini horses. So, for those of you who are kind of on the fence about maybe putting that into your 2026 plans, we would love to have you. So, definitely, like I said, set your calendars for that. And then, of course, as always, like I said, we take and do these every single month, these parent webinars. And so, be sure to check us out on YouTube, Guiding Bright Minds, and hit subscribe, hit like, so that way you can get more of these awesome monthly webinars. So today we have with us Jenny Dopp, right? Jenny Dopp, like top. Jenny Top, she is the COO and Director of Family Programs for Caring Tide. So we are so excited to have her kind of walk us through this. Today is all about our choices today determine our tomorrow. So what will help, what will ultimately happen to my child when I'm no longer here? And interesting, I've talked to parents about this before, and a lot of times they think we have to wait until children are 18, right? So they're an adult, and then we start thinking about that. And as we know, time's going to creep up and there's so much that goes into that planning. So I'm really excited to kind of learn how can parents be proactive. Today we're going to discover some helpful resources and tools to guide you in creating a family life care plan and help you answer the most important question: what will happen to my loved one when I'm no longer here? So Jenny, without further ado, take us away. Thank you for being here, and yeah, it's all you, hun.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's see. If can you see my screen? Okay.
I sure can. Caring Tide, planning for the future.
Okay, perfect. And I just want to pull up one more thing. Okay, here we go. So I want to give you a disclaimer and kind of a warning for this presentation. It's a lot of information. And you may feel like it's a fire hose of information. And the reason for that is sometimes I only get this opportunity to show you this training and this education. This is strictly education, no sales, about how to put a life care plan together. And this is, if you're a provider on the call, this is still great information for you because this is information you can share with your families as you're interacting. Because a lot of times, as parents and caregivers, there's a lot of anxiety about the future. And then also, as the self advocate, there's other challenges there as far as transitioning to adulthood or anxiety about the future as well, or launching and having success in that realm. So, this presentation, there's something for everyone. I will move through it pretty fast. So Eve is going to monitor the questions and kind of stop me, but we'll also try to save time at the end to really go through the questions and cover something again if it didn't quite make sense. So please use that chat. I do realize this is a lot of information and I do go fast. Um, if you are interested in more education, because this is an overview about how to put the entire life care plan together, you can go to our website, caringtide.com, and click on our events tab. And there's different webinars that I teach. I have about 12 different educational webinars where we break down things like Social Security, Medicaid waivers, Medicaid health care, ABLE accounts, a specific class just on estate planning. So if you feel like this was a little too much and you want to get into the details on some of these topics, go over to our website and register for other webinars that might give you a little bit more information. For instance, I know we have one coming up on the 20th that will just focus on estate planning. So that's just a little bit of a warning for you of just stick with me. I've got you. We're going to put this together. So a little bit about me. Again, I'm Jenny Dopp, and I am the COO of Caring Tide and also the director of the family program. My credentials are not only college degrees, but also a CHSNC designation. That means I'm a chartered special needs consultant. I specialize in this type of planning. I've been in this space for about 16 years, helping families in different areas plan through nonprofit work, transition to adulthood curriculum development, and then also in this space with more of the disability planning. So this is a picture of my cute family. I have 4 biological children, ages 27 down to 19, and my second son, Jackson, is 25, and he is on the autism spectrum, but he also has a rare chromosome duplication. So there's a lot going on there, and he was the first diagnosed in our state and the 11th in the world. And so it's been a very much a pioneering journey for us, not only to help the people that are diagnosed with this chromosome duplication, but also just trying to find my people, trying to find resources. Back then when he was diagnosed, autism wasn't even a covered diagnosis. And so it really has been a struggle for us. And I never want moms to have to go through what we've been through. And so that's part of what I do. This is a professional and personal mission for me because I walk this every day with you. So I walk the walk and talk the talk. I get to some extent what parents are going through. So the reason for Caring Tide coming about was because of myself as well as our founder. And I might have a picture in here of him. I'll check. But his wife said to him one day, you know what, you as a certified financial planner, he's been doing it for 23 years, you've done a great job. And we are in a great space financially, but I actually need help now. We haven't signed our child up for the Medicaid waiver. We don't know how to do Social Security. We've got to update our special needs trust. I need help now. So he started looking for resources, and there were a lot of great attorneys out there and a lot of great financial planners, but nobody that was looking at holistic planning, planning for all aspects of life. And so that became the genesis of Caring Tide. And our mission is actually to give every single family impacted by disabilities the opportunity for lifelong guided support. Because one phrase I hear over and over again in the disability community is, I don't know what I don't know. And so I don't even know what my next right step is because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I just hear about things like guardianship or waivers or Social Security, but it's just also intimidating because that's not the language you're speaking every day. So we've developed this program and we help people at different tiers based upon their needs and their circumstances. So this is one of the ways that we're fulfilling our mission is providing these educational webinars. And then I have other opportunities, which I'll show you at the end with just we offer a free consultation if you want more information, and I can show you the different ways we can support you either through kind of a DIY self-guided program, or if you want to work with us directly. So let's jump in. This is the number one concern that parents have. Who will care for my child if I can't? And we need to tweak that a little bit because it's not if I can't, it's a matter of when I can't. I'm going to use a lot of personal examples just because we're living this too. But when my husband was 46 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer. And it was a shock. It came out of nowhere. We were just doing some random blood work for some employment insurance for his job, and some levels came back high. And so we started pursuing the testing, and the cancer was identified. And at the time, they said it's really aggressive. We think we can get it, but you need to know that. And so, because of the way he was presenting with his health and his incapacity, we started planning his funeral. As a mom, I was like, okay, as a single mom, how am I going to navigate this? He's been kind of the breadwinner. I've been doing part-time work in the disability community all of these years, but I needed to reevaluate. And so there were a lot of questions for me. And spoiler alert, he's okay. We were able to get all of the cancer, and he's been in remission for about 5 years. But it was one of those like wake up calls to me as a mom of like, okay, we have a trust, but it hasn't been updated. I have term life insurance, but I'm pretty sure it's about to expire. And I just didn't have a good idea of where we were, of where we were sitting. So as I work with families across the country, they have a lot of questions like this. So they might have a 16-year-old and now they're staring down guardianship. But wait, should I do supported decision making instead? What about this thing that everyone's talking about with a waiver? And are there wait lists? And what about Medicaid paybacks and, Social Security and all of this? So whether you have a child that is just coming out of the NICU or whether you have a 46-year-old that has a disability, we have resources for you no matter where you are because our planning is holistic. We're looking at every single family member in the family because it's not just the child with a disability that has needs. All of my kids have what's called CPTSD, complex PTSD, because of being raised with a brother with significant mental health disorders and disabilities and violence. And so it impacts everybody in the family. And even as caregiver, there's something that's called caregiver fatigue, and caregiver fatigue is real. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing everyone's needs as we put together this life care plan. So it's not just Jackson that we're planning for, it's everybody. And a life care plan is a coordinated strategy to incorporate family goals, individual goals, so definitely your goals as well as your child's, and a plan for achieving these desired successful outcomes with an eye planning for the individual with unique challenges. Now, we've worked with over 100 families recently putting their life care plan together. And we've kind of morphed our system and simplified it a little because it is so complex. But when you break it down to the foundational planning level, it really is 7 different areas. And so again, with different webinars that I teach, we go through and we go in depth on each of the 7 webinars. But my goal today is to give you enough of an overview so that if there's a parent on this call, that they can start to understand and take that personal assessment. Where are you? What do you have done? Well done. And what do you have left to do that you just, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. So these are the different foundations: finding your people, creating a vision, unlocking benefits and support, protecting with legal safeguards, building financial security, empowering growth and independence, and surrounding yourself with caring professionals. So as you start to put this together, remember we have to focus on Jackson, your child with a disability. Of course, they're the reason why we're doing this. But don't forget about those other children or the other, maybe you only have one child, but there might be other circumstances. Maybe you're caring for aging parents, or maybe you're helping somebody else in your family. So think about the other people. And then, of course, think about yourself. This is one of those situations where we've got to put our own oxygen mask on first. And the more secure we can build the plan as parents, then the better the plan will be overall. We do not want to plan in a silo. If I only plan for Jackson and dedicate all funding to Jackson, and I leave myself as a parent unsecured for retirement, that's going to impact Jackson as well. So remember that all, these are circles that intersect with each other. Let's talk about some timelines. So find yourself on this timeline, and I'll talk you through my experience, and you can kind of put your experience in. But this is your cute neighbor down the street. They have a brand new baby. They get them into school. The baby graduates, launches, and then you're focused on yourself for retirement and eventually your passing. And a lot of people do put in together estate plans if you're in this typical scenario. But for our families, it's a lot more complicated. My story started when he was 5 months in utero and we identified brain structure anomalies. Then at 3 years old, putting him into early intervention and preschool, and then strapping him onto the preschool special education school bus as a 3 year old, turning my child over to these public educators that I didn't know, and it was really hard. And then getting him into regular special education and using IDEA and IEPs and fighting, so to speak, with the school district during those elementary education years for his IEP. And then again at age 14, as we're really digging into transition, getting calls from the junior high frequently about behavior and, having to shift the IEP again, going toe to toe with the district again when he's 18. Is he going to graduate? Does he qualify for post-high services? And then at 22, when the school bus actually did stop coming, what's next? And was there enough preparation during that transition IEP stage from 14 to 22 to really lock in a warm handoff to other agencies or to have a plan for the future? Or is it going to be video games in my basement? So I had to really figure that out. And then, of course, along that way through 18 to 22, we're working on things like guardianship or supported decision making or both, a combination of both. And then also SSI and employment support. So it's a lot. And if you're feeling overwhelmed and tired as a parent, here's the reason why. It's been a lot. It is a lot. It will be a lot. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So, of course, as we're moving through this, here's one more picture that kind of illustrates it from a different angle. But as we're planning for things like finances, this is the basic like Dave Ramsey type model where you're saving your first $500, you're saving your first $1,000 for your emergency fund, and then you're paying off your debts, and then you're starting to build accumulation, and then you have this nice pool of assets, ideally, when you get to be retired. Well, again, our family is different, and so we have to think about this from a life care planning perspective. So, one of those areas that we have to think about is proper gifting and inheritance management. So, my father-in-law has some property in Idaho and he has about 30 grandchildren. What if he sells this property in Idaho and before his passing, and a check lands at our house for $10,000 for each of the grandchildren? This isn't going to happen, but it's a nice dream. But if it happens for Jackson, that's going to derail our plan. So you'll see again, remember those circles that intersect. We can't just plan in a silo. We've got to make sure Grandpa knows not to leave money to Jackson in Jackson's name. And I'll show you what we can do if that happens down the line. But we need to have a plan in place to structure not only our gifts, the inheritance we're leaving for Jackson, and the planning that we're doing for him, but also other people in our family. The other thing that we need to calculate, it's really a math question for you. You probably are working or you maybe are doing it yourself and you're planning for your retirement and you're figuring in there's some Social Security projections for you. But have you ever done the math equation and figured out how much do you need for Jackson to get to the end of his life? So we've got my husband's stream of his planning. How much does he need? How much do I need? And of course, that's together because we combine our finances in our household. But then we've got Jackson. So those are actually three streams of funding that you have to plan for. And most families, I would say 90% of families that I start working with are only planning for mom and dad. They know that they've got a plan for their child, but they're like, well, there's Social Security, maybe, if your child qualifies. There's waivers, maybe, if your child qualifies. And they'll just get, we'll sell the house, we've got some retirement. But what mom and dad aren't planning for over here is what if there's long-term care needs? What if there's assisted living needs? What happens if your portfolio crashes? Parents have no idea what's going to be left there until they run the numbers and they really dig deep. So we have some software that we use to plan for this third stream of income, and we take in those first two streams of income into account, and we factor in things like what could be the political changes that would happen? What about inflation? All of these different factors. So we've got to figure out how much do you need for supplemental needs. Then also some other tools that you can use is develop a family mission statement. What are your core values? Do you want to pay for school? Are they on their own for school? What about a home? Are they going to live with you? Are you going to sell your home and downsize and then buy them put money towards a townhome or something? Are they have a higher level of support need? So are you looking more at waiver services for things like group homes or community living programs? So there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of people take care of that through some legal planning, which I'll show you in a minute. And then one of the last areas is just the caregiver support. I am 52, I'll disclose. Because of the stress, a lot of autoimmune diseases pop up in our lives as caregivers because of the high stress load. And so, about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So, I was even trying to open the top of my Stanley cup the other day, and it was tough for me to do that. And so, I just think, what is going to happen to me physically as I continue to age and also try to maintain this level of caregiving? And that's not going to be possible. And I also want to enjoy my retirement years because I've been doing this for a long time. And as you all know, of parents of kids who are neurodivergent, it's a lot. And we love our children, but we also need to have good quality of life and balance for ourselves. So I can still stay dedicated. I can still be Jackson's person, but I know that I'm going to need to add people to help support me as I age. So how much will that cost? And then again, the residential needs, transition plans, will they be able to work or are you going to need to supplement? Jackson works about 4 or 5 days a week at McDonald's, which is fantastic. It's awesome, but it's not a livable wage where he could live on his own with that. And so I would need to supplement a little bit to cover what Social Security might not and have some creative ways to do that. And we want to always make sure that he's eligible for benefits. And then, of course, those government benefits. I work with a lot of people, and I need to think if you guys have a better name for this, put it in the chat. But I call it a little bit of no man's land, where Jackson has a foot in the disability world because of his level of IDD, of intellectual developmental disability. He's right there at the borderline, but his working memory at 68 really brings him a little bit lower. But he in other areas he's like 80. So he has a lot of capacity. He can run the drive-through at McDonald's, but in some ways emotionally he can be a 3-year-old. So I call it no man's land because you have a foot in both worlds. And then there's some people who are more significant in that space and their window's a little bit tighter and they don't qualify for any benefits. They don't qualify for Social Security, Medicaid healthcare, or Medicaid waivers. So in that case, your pyramid or your planning structure as a parent is a lot more significant and actually, I wouldn't say more important, but it's more vital that you get this done because you are not, right now at least, planning on layering in Social Security and Medicaid. So let's talk about that first step, just briefly. Again, a mission statement. What's important to you? Do you want independence as much as possible? Should we get him living on his own? Does he want to live with you? Education, is that important? Is the social piece really important? Is travel important? What is it that's important to your family? And that will give you the foundation of what your plan should look like. The next step is the emergency plan. What should happen in the first 24 to 48 hours after something happens to you? So with my templates, with my clients, I give them these templates that we've built for them. So it's really easy to go in and structure this plan. And then some of that information will get carried over to the letter of intent, the LOI. And this is more extensive. This is the guidebook on your family. This is telling the next caregiver, Jackson wants the blue plate when he eats. He has to be first in line at a family party or there's too much anxiety. He really likes his job at McDonald's. He wouldn't be happy working in an office. He has a cardiac issue where he needs an echo every year because of aortic dilation issues. So we need to make sure they know about all the cardiology stuff. So put everything into the letter of intent. Other areas or examples that you would want to include, and again, my template would help you with this, but include things like independence, financial well-being, what's at play. We've got McDonald's, we've got an ABLE account, we've got Social Security. There's this life insurance that will be deposited into the trust upon our passing. What are all of the different pieces they need to know? Account numbers, the name of account, what that money's meant for. What is the quality of life? What Jackson's quality of life is very different. What he would say is quality of life is very different than my 3 other typical kids. So what does it look like for Jackson? Not what does the caregiver think it should look like, but what are the components to make Jackson happy? And then again, employment, education, and also housing needs. A couple of things you should know about the letter of intent is it's not legally binding typically. A judge could use it if your estate is having to go through probate, and they could use that as consideration. But really, this letter of intent is meant to help the next caregiver and other family members. Family's awesome. Everybody loves each other, but it's very interesting as family members pass away and so many opinions and ideologies come forward about what should be done. Feelings are there. It's a tender time. And so as much as you can do as a parent and as a provider and as a caregiver to lay this out for your family members. Even I have guides for, a basic funeral plan. What do you want? Do you want Aunt Sarah to sing at your service? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried next to your mom? It just takes away all of the fighting and, all of the discussions about, well, I think mom really wanted this. And we're having a really tender experience with this because we're not only doing this planning as parents for our loved ones who might pass before us, but also because we won't be here, we just want to make all these decisions easy for our family members. So we won't have time to go through every single bullet, but I believe Eve, they send out the recording and it's posted on your YouTube channel, your webinar platform. So
Correct.
come back and watch this if we go through this too fast, and you can kind of look at the rest of the bullets on some of these slides. This is a different tool that you can use because, foundation number 2 in our planning process is getting organized. So the emergency plan, the letter of intent, and the medical notebook are all ways you can get organized. So you can use a medical care notebook in 2 ways. The first way is to have it be for Jackson. You can do it as a paper notebook with tabs and documents for him to look at, or you could create it digitally if they're really into tech. We have software that we provide to all of our clients to help them stay organized. So you could do anything that works for you. But this is giving Jackson an opportunity to track his labs, understand who his specialists are, know what his medication is and the dosage and who the pharmacy is. And it helps him learn autonomy and also gives him empowerment to try to control as much as he can about his medical piece. And I'll work with families specifically in transition to adult health care. So this is one of those pieces that I work with with the family to try to get that established. So that's one way to use it. The other side is as a parent to try to keep everything straight because your legal documents are immense. And then there's things like special education, but the medical piece is so important, it kind of deserves its own place. So if you have a child with special health care needs or medically fragile, this is something that you would want to consider establishing if you haven't already. Now let's get into foundation number 3, which is our access to benefits. We're going to go through this pretty quickly. So again, if you're new to Social Security or Medicaid, just look for one of my other classes that will go into depth on this. But the basic overview or the reason for SSI, for Social Security, is to provide for the basic care of our loved ones. And usually that is a shelter, a place for them to live. So at most, across the country, the most you could get in 2026 is $994 for Social Security. There was a little bit of a COLA increase. And that sounds like a great little sum, but not everybody gets that amount. Some states you'll get a little bit more, like my family's in California. There's a state stipend that adds on top of the 994, so they get a little bit more. But it just is about enough to cover your rent or your fair share that you're paying to your parents or to your landlord. And then there should be a little bit left over potentially for things like food or other expenses. And so as you look at the left-hand side, that's kind of what it covers there. And depending if you've accessed a Medicaid waiver, you might also get some respite care built in. You might get some provider supports with like employment supports or day programs. But again, in Utah, where I live, our state is very fiscally conservative, and our legislature hasn't allocated enough money for funding for our waiver programs, that you're getting with your CES waivers and community board access and all of that. And so we've been on the wait list for 10 years. So we don't even get those bottom two with the Social Security. I've got to fund all of that privately. And that's how it is across the country, typically if you're in a red state. So if you're leaving Colorado, I'll just throw out this little education tip. That waiver doesn't go with you. You would have to apply for a new waiver in a new state. If you're going to California, Oregon, Washington, New York, Massachusetts, you'll be fine. Other states, you're probably going to start on a wait list first, and I'd be happy to chat about that with you offline if you need help with what I call project move and finding the right place to move. So on the right-hand side is where the private funding happens. So that could happen in an ABLE account, which is a dedicated savings account. Social Security and Medicaid do not look at that funding. So it's a great shelter for funding. Also, the Supplemental Needs Trust, or what we call a Special Needs Trust. There's two types of a Special Needs Trust, a first party and a third party. I'll go over that in a little bit. But a Supplemental Needs Trust is a great resource for you to be able to save funding. And then, of course, family support, neighbors, church members, your girlfriends that can pick him up from his job. You have to think about what are all your funding sources, whether it's a paid support or a natural support. And then what are they going to pay for? Jackson's superpower with autism is politics. So he is constantly following the president, he's constantly following Congress. And if he didn't have his phone or his computer, then I know that's first world problems, but internet, phone, computer, that's quality of life for him. That's helping him maintain his community and, his Discord channels and whatever he's doing to follow politics. So that is one example. Also, vacations. We love the beach. We live in the desert, so getting to the water for us is a big deal. How are we going to pay for that for him to be able to have that continuity in his life? And then, of course, the Star Wars t-shirts, the haircuts, the McDonald's and getting DoorDash. What are all of the things that he loves to do in his life? And how are we going to pay for that? Because Social Security is not going to be enough money for that. So Social Security, the big thing I want you to know about this is to keep that account, the Social Security SSI Representative Payee account, this account where the SSI drops down into that each month. We want to keep that below $2,000 per month so that we can meet all of the eligibility requirements. Now, I have some people, we'll talk about SSDI in just a minute, and they'll say, oh, we don't have an asset threshold anymore. And that can be true. But if you're on Medicaid healthcare and Medicaid waivers, we still want to maintain eligibility. So just know that there's different eligibility and maintenance requirements on each of the different programs. And so we can help you understand that as well. There is a little calendar I want to add here. If your child's younger than 18, your income is deeming. Your income will be looked at to see if you make too much for your child to qualify for SSI. But once your child is 18, they're their own person and they can qualify on their own. And so after their 18th birthday, that's when you would want to start that process and be able to evaluate if they need Social Security or if they qualify, excuse me. Once you get the Social Security, most likely you would get the Medicaid health care. You might have to apply for it separately, but that typically, if you qualify for SSI, most likely you're going to qualify for Medicaid health care. Now, I know I have a lot of professionals on the call, and you're all, experts in your own field. So just know what I'm giving you today is general information. Of course, there's going to be the one-offs, there's going to be scenarios, there's going to be survivorship benefits or parents who have disabilities. So children qualify in different ways. Yes, absolutely. But today is just about general information. So my child is turned 18. We get them on Social Security. It's going well. I'm getting about $800 a month for Social Security from SSI. And then they start working a little bit and they're paying into FICA. And all of a sudden, we get something called SSDI. So this happens in a couple of ways for kids. Jackson started working at our local amusement park in high school, and then he switched to McDonald's. So when it was time for him to apply, because I kind of drug my feet a little bit on applying, he actually went right on to SSDI instead because he had enough work credits. He had paid into FICA. So that's one way that you can get the SSDI. And SSDI is great because you get a little bit more money per month, and also that you don't have that same $2,000 asset limit for the Social Security only. Okay. The other way that you could get SSDI is I go to retire and I start drawing my Social Security. And one of the boxes on my application will say, do you have a child with a disability? And I check yes, and that will trigger them to go look for Jackson on the SSI program. But we actually have to apply for that benefit for Jackson. It's the child disability benefit or the disabled adult child. There's two names for it, but there's that credit where let's say my projection is going to be $4,000 per month on my Social Security as a retired parent. It's possible for Jackson to get up to 50% of that allotment. So instead of getting like 900 a month, he's now going to get up to 2,000 a month because he's getting half of my projection. And then when I pass away, that'll change and he'll get up to 75% of that projection. So these are pieces that as I'm doing your math equation, I'm layering all of this into that to figure out how much you need for the trust. The other thing that you should know is about the health insurance. So they've been on Medicaid, but once you've been on SSDI for 24 months, then you're going to shift to Medicare. And that happens, and people are surprised by it. And they're like, well, gosh, my doctor who was I could see on Medicaid, they aren't accepting this now. And so there's possibly some shifts. Usually it's not that big of a deal, but it is something that you would want to be aware of is that shift from Medicaid over to Medicare. Now let's talk a little bit, again, general information here. This is crash course. We're moving quick. A crash course on Medicaid here. Think of Medicaid as like a house. There's a front door, there's a back door, there's a window. There's lots of ways to get into services. Like my granddaughter was in the NICU for over a month. And so she received Medicaid, institutionalized Medicaid, because she was in the hospital for more than 30 days. And she only had that Medicaid for a year, and then she lost it. Well, with our kids, there are a couple of ways that you can get the Medicaid. Medicaid is not Medicare, and there's Medicaid Health Care, which is one program. And then there's another program, and it's a Medicaid waiver, and it's called HCBS, Home and Community-Based Waivers. So we have this block of funding that comes from the federal government down to each state. Some states just have that same block of money that they spend down and then it's gone. Other states like Utah will add money to it with a match. And then that money is taken and divided out into other Medicaid programs. So like programs for the unhoused, programs for babies that are born without insurance. Then there's the Medicaid health care, and then there's Medicaid waivers. So this would be your Colorado CES waiver. There's other waivers, of course, too, but that's a common waiver. So this would pay for things like respite, supported living. Some people get caregiver compensation, but just know every single state's program, when they're dividing this out and they're building their waiver program, all the states are different. The eligibility requirements are different. The benefits are different. So if you have a really plush program with Colorado and you're loving it and you leave the state, just know that that's going to change a little bit with your next state. So that is a great tool for you. If you haven't ever looked into the Medicaid waivers for your loved one, that would be a good step in putting this life care plan together. Not everybody's going to qualify. A lot of the waivers for our children require IDD or intellectual developmental disabilities. And so we would want to look at the neuropsych evaluation, see where they fall, and then also look at the subsets in that in the WISC or the Woodcock-Johnson and see what scores are there, but also looking at adaptive. We can't discount the adaptive piece because that's huge. Like I said, if I have Jackson at 25 running down the street screaming, but yet he's, a 75, there's going to be some wiggle room there. It's what kind of documentation can I bring to the table? What are the requirements with your waiver? And so we help guide families through that as well. So step 4, the foundation 4 is your legal piece, everything legal. So guardianship, supported decision making, maybe your child only needs a power of attorney for healthcare and financial, all of those pieces. But the biggest piece to this, after you address what your child's safety and security issues are, is estate planning. So there's benefits to this. We want families to work with attorneys in their state, so their documents are drafted based upon their state laws. But there's benefits to having your estate plan done. Not only is it peace of mind, but it will make a difference to you financially. It's going to reduce death taxes. If you hit a threshold for probate based upon your asset level, then once you pass away, your estate could be frozen while it goes through this probate process. So that's why we want to have your wills and your revocable trust put in place. It also allows you a lot of power to be able to give the money where you want it to go. If you really loved, Guiding Bright Minds and you wanted to donate money to them because of the support they've given you, then that allows you to do that because your family members are not going to know to do that. Or charitable contributions, or setting up a different trust for grandchildren for their education pieces. But if you don't have the resources right now, because a lot of families are paycheck to paycheck and they don't have $6,000 or $4,000 to go and create an estate plan, let's talk about the basics that build up to the trust planning. So the first one is a HIPAA release, or it could be called a release of information with your doctor's offices and your insurance companies, but that allows you access. So once your child turns 18 on their birthday, you as a parent, unless you've worked out something with the doctor's office, will be locked out of their electronic medical record, their EMR. And so it would be more challenging to get their lab results and to get information unless you have something in writing that says you're allowed to access that. So that would be the first thing, is just to get a basic HIPAA release or a release of information. The next thing is to decide upon that level of safety and support that you need to build in. We are shooting for high expectations up here. We're shooting for independence, autonomy, employment, but we're building in this safety net of support. What do they need? Can Jackson, if he were at the doctor, navigate that cardiology appointment? Or is he going to end up somewhere on the spectrum of me needing to support him at some level? So is a full guardianship needed? Is a limited guardianship needed? Is supported decision making, which is a great legal alternative in a lot of states, including Colorado, is that a great option for your loved one? Or can we just do the HIPAA release and maybe like a power of attorney for medical and financial, and just know that there's pros and cons to all of these decisions. With guardianship, they do retain some rights. So again, you'd want to go to my guardianship class to learn more about that. But Jackson retains the right to get married and vote and to be able to drink alcohol or to call his friend. There's a lot of different rights that he can retain. A power of attorney, there's two different types. Again, this is general information. It's called different things in different states. But there's two types of POAs, a springing power of attorney. That's what I have for my husband. It springs into effect when he becomes incapacitated. With Jackson, I would want a durable power of attorney. So it's in effect the day it's signed, and it lists the areas where I have a power of attorney. But it is limited. It would be revocable if Jackson was influenced to have somebody else sign a new PO or have him sign a new POA. So I would have to contest that. Where a guardianship is a legal document, you go before a judge, it's a decree, and it's in place and would have to go before the courts to have that removed. So if Jackson has a lot of assets because he's been working at McDonald's, he's got this little nest egg of Slurpee money and money that, is in his account. It's like almost 40,000 if you can believe that, because he doesn't have a lot of expenses because he lives with us and his life is McDonald's and politics. So I would want to have a will for Jackson. I would want a will for him to say where he wants his money to go if he passes away. And then, of course, as parents, we would want a will as part of our estate planning package. And it's typically called a pour over will, where the will go pour over your whole estate and gather up all of the assets that are remaining there so that they can be distributed. This is also a great tool for people that don't have enough money to do a revocable family trust, which I'll talk about next. It's that top line there. Again, you can go back and watch this presentation back, but it's typically called like a testamentary will, where it's just a will, but it will create Jackson's special needs trust upon our passing. So that is one way you can create your special needs trust, is using your will. The problem with that is it doesn't avoid probate and death taxes depending upon your asset level. So it's not ideal, but it is a great band-aid if you don't have funds to do a revocable trust. What we typically see is a revocable trust where we have mom, we have dad, we are each other's beneficiary. And once the second parent passes away, it triggers the execution of the trust, where the assets would flow down to my three typical children, and Jackson's piece lands in a trust. Now, you see there that there's two different kinds of special needs trust. A first party trust is where Jackson would receive that check from Grandpa at our house in in his name. That cannot go in a third party trust. A third party is everyone else's money, grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, not Jackson. Jackson's money would have to go in a first party trust, which is not ideal. If it's not a lot of money, you could probably put it in an ABLE account. But a first party trust, once Jackson passes away, that money's frozen. And the state comes back and says, okay, did we spend any money on Jackson? And if so, how much did we spend and potentially claw back? Not every single state has a Medicaid recovery or Medicaid payback clause. And so that's something that you would want to talk about with your attorney. If you happen to have money in a first party trust, it would be probably good to make plans to spend that down so that it's not frozen or potentially recovered. The other thing you want to know about Medicaid payback is it's not necessarily just Colorado. Let's say you lived in Utah for 10 years and received Medicaid services in Utah, and then you moved to Colorado and lived in Colorado for 5 years. Colorado may not come back and take that money, but Utah would have a right to come back and take some money for Medicaid payback. It's about where you received services, not necessarily where you live. So you want to be aware of that. Again, work with an attorney in your state so that you can be educated about your state laws. But first party money is Jackson. Third party money is what we leave for Jackson. So here's me and Ryan up at the top. We've made it so that after the second parent passes away, our three kids will get the remainder of our assets, everything that we have left after we've traveled to Europe and after we've bought the fun car. We're saving money for them, but we also want to live a great life. So all the assets will get passed to those three kids. They can have some when they're 18, at 25, and then they'll get the payout at 30 because, we want them to be adults and making good decisions. They can't be addicted to anything. So there's all these stipulations that we build in there. Jackson's will land in a special needs trust that's created after we die. It's called a provision, where it's created after we die. And the reason why we've chosen to do that is we don't have any money to start saving for him now. All of our money is coming to him specifically through a specific life insurance policy that we have for him. So there's no reason grandparents are not going to leave him anything. There's no other money. Best practice is to create the standalone. So we have our trust over here and then a standalone trust for Jackson, where it is open for business today. Anybody can put money in that today. So if you do have grandparents leaving funds, that is a good way to do that. But most of the time, that provision is okay, or you can do the standalone. We're going to run out of time, so I probably won't get to this. There's a lot of different kinds of life insurance that you can use. There's term insurance. There's employer insurance. You work at Walmart, you can get 25,000, but when you leave Walmart, that policy is no longer available to you. Term insurance is available for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, but now you're like me and you're 52 and that term insurance that you bought right out of college is expiring. So you've got to figure out how you can convert that. Or what we can do is if we have enough assets and we don't need the life insurance for us anymore, but I do want to fund Jackson's trust, there's something called a survivorship policy, where after the second parent passes away, then Jackson's trust is named and it will be the receptacle for that $1 million policy. And that way we can use all of our assets for retirement and Jackson's trust is funded independently from our assets. So there's so many ways to do it. You can see the bullet points there. Another kind of trust is a pooled trust where Jackson would have his own little account inside a bigger pool of trusts. And then that organization, the nonprofit or the company that's managing this big pool of trusts invests all the money. They file the taxes on the trust. They pay the bills. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. You have to think about who is your trustee, who's going to manage the money. Is it your sister, or do you really not have capable family members that understand finances? Would it be better to do a hybrid option where you have a corporate trustee managing the trust and then a family member that's like at the boots on the ground person talking to the corporation and helping with the money allocations? So it really just depends upon your situation. There's a lot of ways to do it. And that's one of the modules that I take families through as we're doing their planning. One thing you don't want to forget is your Dear Family and Friends letter. Please don't leave money to Jackson. We're not expecting you to leave him money, but if you do, please name his ABLE account if it's under 20,000 for a year deposit, or the third party special needs trust. The other thing I should say about ABLE accounts that we'll get to in just a second is there is potentially a Medicaid payback depending on where you received your Medicaid services. So that's something to be aware of on ABLE. It's a little bit different with ABLE, where you can pay for the funeral, you can settle the estate, and then the Medicaid payback would happen. But just be aware, I don't believe Colorado is a Medicaid recovery state, so I think you're in the clear there if you're only getting Medicaid services in Colorado. Just be aware that it's there if you live somewhere else. So how much is enough to save? You'll want to use a couple of tools. So there's the private assets, what Ryan and I are saving for our family. Then there's that life insurance policy. Then there's natural supports, neighbors, church community, friends from school, and then public benefits like the Medicaid and the Social Security. But if you don't qualify for that bottom piece of the pie, it's going to put a lot more pressure up on the private asset piece. So realize where your family situation is. Here's a couple of bullets just so you can come back and watch this on life insurance. Always coordinate it with your overall strategy. Make sure you tell your attorney about what you have in play, and make sure you go through a process with us or another professional where you can see what you have at play. Is it enough, or have you overfunded? Do you have too much? Because then you're really harming yourself for retirement if you focus too much on these other tools that weren't exactly needed. So again, here are those examples. Employer, it's great, but once you leave the employer, it's gone. So don't just have that be your only insurance. Term is a great tool. The Dave Ramsey approach is you only need term insurance when you're young, and then you'll have enough assets when you're older, so you don't need term. That's correct, except for families like ours, because we still are going to have requirements and needs for our family even after we are retiring. Jackson's still going to need support. So I've got to figure out beyond that term policy how much I need and how I'm going to pay for it. And of course, there's whole life and also universal life and different ways that you can use that. But that survivorship policy that I talked about, where it's after Ryan and I both pass away, it'll just fund Jackson outright. It's a great tool, and we can help you with that as well. So I'm just going to show the ABLE account slides. I'm sure you guys have had classes about ABLE before. I'd be happy to teach another class. Just a couple of things that I would want to emphasize. It helps you keep your Social Security account under $2,000 if you're on SSI. It's also a great receptacle for an UTMA, an UGMA, or a 529 if there's a beneficiary on that, and that's going to land in Jackson's name. The benefits went up this year in 2026. You can now put 20,000 in a year for that account. And since Jackson's working, he gets to add an additional 15,000 and change into the ABLE account. But once you reach 100,000, just know your SSI could be paused until you spend that down. Here's just another slide on that. An ABLE account doesn't replace a trust. We want to use it to move money around. So money comes down to SSI. It comes out to me and Ryan to pay for rent and fair share. We can use that for household expenses, or we can push it back to an ABLE. Or if we have a standalone third-party special needs trust that's open, we can take that household money, push it over to that special needs trust, and then that special needs trust can allocate money back to the ABLE. You cannot move money from an ABLE to a special needs trust. So it doesn't move that way. It only moves in the triangle. Okay, just as a reminder, our goal is to give every single family in America this training. And so that's why we do this. That's why I do what I do. If you feel like you want to talk through something, here is the information of ways you can do that. Just go to our website, caringtide.com. You'll see a block on the front page that says free consultation, and just book the consult. We'll just walk through your scenarios and figure out pathways that we can help you. So that was a lot, I know. Eve, what questions did we get?
Oh, well, first and foremost, just thank you so much. That was incredible. Just really having this holistic approach and viewpoint of all of this. And yeah, so thank you so much. So we do have a question, and it says, for the kiddo to qualify for SSI at 18, should we not seek a guardianship? And then it asks, should we just have DPOAs?
Yeah, great question. So those are independent of each other. You could have Social Security and not have guardianship, or you could have Social Security and be the guardian. It's more about the data. So think back, think of Social Security like an IEP, that you had to have data in the IEP to get certain things. It's the same thing as they go through and evaluate your eligibility requirements for Social Security. The data has to make you qualify. So we're looking more at neuropsych scores, doctor's letters, adaptive scores, safety and security. Are they an eloper? Is there violence? Is there a reason where they could be harmed or they could harm the community? There's all of these different things that are looked at, but we start with a good neuropsych score. So, but I also want to have a caveat. I have a lot of clients who have a diagnosis with 22q deletion or DeGeorge syndrome. And a lot of them are kind of in this no man's land where maybe the neuropsych score doesn't show the need. And so they never apply because people have told them, no, you got to be below 70 in order to qualify. Well, that's not always the case. There's adaptive scores that are considered as well. And Social Security is going to do an interview with your child and really get a feel for, what their capacity is, which is a dual issue because if they nail it in the interview, that's why we want the scores to back up what the level of IDD is. So it's very independent. The only time I would say that guardianship thing comes into a question is if you want to have them go to some sort of college or training program and they have a requirement where the child has to be their own guardian. They have to, the self-advocate cannot be conserved or have guardianship over them. That's the only situation I've really seen. There is a push in our community right now to really look at supported decision making first. Remember with the IEP, it was LRE, least restrictive environment. It's the same thing with guardianship when we get to 18. We want to look for the least restrictive alternative, LRA. That will be great for your child. But if your child is a high support need child, they need monitoring, they elope, we're probably looking at some level of guardianship or a limited guardianship, at least in a lot of areas, because we want access and we want to be able to be a good case manager, so to speak, and advocate for our child. But not everybody needs guardianship. Even though Jackson's running down the street, sometimes if he's really upset, I don't have guardianship over him. We have POAs for financial and medical. And then if the situation changes down the line, I will look at guardianship and he knows that and he wants that. He wants to be supported. So what is going to give you the greatest access, but also not, we don't want to be helicopter moms because we're so good at that because we've done it their whole lives. So it's this balance, right? What's going to be the best fit?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions as we start to kind of wrap up? I did just add your website into the chat so everybody has access to this. But definitely, I mean, take Jenny up on this offer. Oh my goodness, a free complimentary consultation to go over this. Like you said, there is so much robust information that you covered in this that I feel like we could have a conversation about each slide going back and forth. So
Yeah.
this is truly so invaluable. Do you want to also put how other folks, so yes, obviously going to the website, but your contact information as well? What's the
Yeah.
best way people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. You can email me, Jenny, JENNIE, at caringtide.com. If you have your own organization, or you're a provider in some way and you think that your students or your clients would enjoy education, if we have space on our calendar, I try to teach one a week. So it's 50 per year. We're already booking into April. So if you want to reach out to us about a webinar, or if you have a specific question, then I can either just shoot you back an answer or I can say, you know what, this is a bigger conversation. Here's a link. Just pick a date and book a time on my calendar. And we didn't really get to foundation 6 or 7. And that's really because we customize it. So this is where we're talking about housing. What are the housing options available? What are the employment supports? What about independent living? What about if you don't have a family member to be a guardian, looking at professional guardianship services, mental health supports, assistive technology, money management resources for your loved one. I mean, we just really have the depth and breadth that get captured in Foundation 6 and 7. So that's why I love working one-on-one with families. But if that's not going to work for your situation, we have other options to help you as well.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness, Jenny. Thank you so, so much. Thank you all so much for spending your lunch hour. Maybe this is your lunch hour, depending on where you're located. But thank you for spending an hour with myself and Jenny from Caring Tide. Again, Jenny, thank you so much for this. We very much would love to have you come back. And yes, so thank you for always for being supporters of Guiding Bright Minds. For more information about the different providers and the different resources that we have, you can go to guidingbrightminds.com. And just remember, folks, you are never alone on this journey. If there's anything that you can take away from today, is there are so many providers and so many resources out there for you. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next month for our next webinar. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Eve. We appreciate you. We'll be in touch.
Absolutely.